Hey everyone, I'm Ryan,
And I'm Olivia.
and welcome to our 13th episode of Finding True North. Finding True North is all about sharing those pivotal lessons and moments that have helped shape the careers of the guests that join us each week. Um, Throughout the session, you can ask questions and there'll be a poll to participate in. You can do that in kind of two ways. For questions, you can use the comments section on whatever platform you're listening to now. For the poll and also for questions, you can use slido.com, which we'll pull up later with the details of how to be involved. But anyway, Olivia, who do we have today as our guest?
Well, I'm very, very excited to have Dr. Jahnabi with us today. Jahnabi and I met actually at a house party at university. We met through a mutual friend, and it just so happened that Jess, who was previously on the series, was with me at this party. We both went together. We met Jahnabi there. Now, Jahnabi became very instrumental in my whole PhD journey because Jahnabi was one of the first PhD students I met. And when I was writing my first academic paper as an undergrad, I remember Jahnabi giving me tips about engineering and how to write the document. Was at the same time we were watching a fashion catwalk video. I remember it
Yes.
very distinctively. Ever since then, Jahnabi and I have become very good friends, and we've stayed in touch. And even though we're separated by country at the moment, our friendship bond is still very, very strong. So I'm very excited to have Jahnabi with us today, and she's going to be telling us about her journey navigating undergrad, PhD, but then life afterwards, because the desire is that we want to travel for work. And of course, in the pandemic, it makes it a bit difficult, but it's more than just the country. It's whether the culture fits you, and how do you recognize that? So Jai's going to give us some great insight today.
All right. Thank you, Olivia, for such a wonderful and lovely introduction, as well as the, jogging down the memory lane. That was really nice. As Olivia mentioned, indeed, we met during our PhD, or rather during the university time. So a bit of history or tiny bit of introduction about me. I am Jahnabi Basumatary. I hail from the far eastern state of India called Assam. I think a lot of people in the UK especially will be familiar with the name due to the tea, Assam tea. My parents are still based in Assam, and that's where I also finished my bachelor's degree in industrial and production engineering. After my degree, I thought of pursuing higher studies in master's at the University of Southampton. So I moved to the UK in 2011. There, after the completion of my master's, I was offered a PhD position under the same department of mechanical engineering, but under the subject of tribology engineering. However, it was more interdisciplinary than I had imagined or I was aware of. And that was a good thing because I got to know more people from the university itself that were from other departments. And I also worked under close collaboration with Lloyd's Register, which is like one of the biggest maritime industry in UK. After, or rather, before the completion of my last year, right after my defense, I landed a job in Belgium. So in 2017, I moved to the Belgium for my first stint as a sales engineer. Now, this was a big move from what I had done, which was mostly research-based in mechanical field. However, this company, Match ID, dealt with making softwares that helps with material characterization using optical methods to measure 2D and 3D strain and stress measurements, basically. So it wasn't very far from what I had studied during my master's, but the whole sales concept was new for me. And it turned out that actually technical sales, which I was doing, is very different from your conventional sales, Basically, you need to have the full knowledge of the know-how of your product on the technical level. So because you're the first port of contact when things can go wrong with the software or the hardware, you need to know it inside out, like you made it or you produced it. So that is something a bit different from what I've heard from conventional sales. Of course, you get to have a lot of exposure with the marketing side of it, and also the branding side of it, which was also a lot of fun. But pretty soon, at the end of almost a year of working as sales engineer, I realized that I didn't want this for a prolonged period of time as my career. So I started looking further into finding something that was more related to what I had studied. And then I moved to another company within Belgium called Solera's Advanced Coatings. And here I landed a job, albeit it was a bit of a short tenure. It was as junior R&D engineer, where I had to make materials or raw materials that can be then used as thin film, that can be used to produce thin film coatings. Now, just to give you a tiny example, you know the shiny layer that's inside the crisp packets, basically, those are deposited using a method of thin film coating. And I was preparing recipes for the raw materials, or targets as we call them, that can be used to then deposit the thin layers with the use of an advanced machine, basically. So that was a short-term, I would say, job role. After that, I moved back to India for a short time, where I actually was still doing consultancy for a company based in London. So I was working remotely, but on a volunteer basis. And this company called Deep Science Ventures basically caters to helping people with ventures start up their own companies or concepts and realize those concepts, basically. So that was also quite insightful. Again, short, but quite insightful, I would say. However, I mean, as you can see, I've hopped around jobs a few times. That, of course, came with a bit of setback. And I started reflecting, maybe I need to focus more on personal development and traineeships or trainings that can really help me with my leadership qualities, and as well as engineering qualities. And this is where I stumbled across Omit. So at the beginning of 2019, I moved back to Belgium, where I started vigorously looking for companies that would provide me such trainings. And I stumbled across a lot of different companies, but the one that struck the most to me was Omit. They are based in Utrecht in the Netherlands. And it turned out that they were actually catering to what I was hoping to find, and that is engineering and management traineeship in collaboration with ASML. Now, for me, traineeship was the most important, or it had higher priority at this point. And I thought, okay, whatever job I get, which I want, which is actually materials engineering or materials specialist, will then be a secondary thing. Rather, I would like that traineeship to take priority, and then I can find a job wherever I want afterwards. But it so turned out that ASML was hiring somebody at that moment as material specialist. So I landed the job that I would have taken anyway after the traineeship. So it was kind of like a win-win situation. Anyway, so that was a bit about my studies and career path. Now, the pivotal moment that I would like to specifically point out is there was this quote I came across on LinkedIn about 2 to 3 years ago, and it was emphasizing that it doesn't matter at which age you achieve something, so long as you achieve it, because timelines that you think are supposed to be met at a certain age are usually actually put as a societal pressure on you, or is put by someone else. Oh, these are something that people expect you to do, but actually it's all inconsequential if you are happy with what you achieved, no matter whenever you have achieved. The fact is that you were passionate about it and you achieved it is what matters. And this quote rather had a big impact on how I started reflecting into my life. And this is where I started thinking, okay, traineeship is something maybe people start doing when they first enter or first start looking into their career, and not something that they've done after, I don't know, a few years of working. But no, I started reflecting and thinking, actually, it doesn't matter when I started. If I feel there is a gap, then there is a gap and we need to do it. And actually, I felt that a lot of the time companies, as well as you, don't meet each other's expectations fully at the beginning. And this is where it's important that people take time to understand what is needed and what is missing. Anyway, so this was the pivotal moment for me to realize that I needed to fill my gap first and be satisfied before I start giving my best to whichever company I'm going to be accepted in. So coming to the poll, I have a question. So do you have a hobby or hobbies that you're passionate about and love that you would like to explore career-wise? The importance of this question will be touched later on, but I will hand it over to Ryan to explain to you what to do here.
Okay. So to participate in the poll, you log into, well, you don't actually have to log in, slido.com and use the code FTN, which you see on the screen, and that will take you to this poll where you can answer it. I love the question, so I'm excited to come back to the response at the end when Olivia and I will be back for Q&A. So I'll let you carry on, and as we move to the next slide, you'll still see the code and the website at the bottom of the screen. So.
Okay. Yeah. So coming to my vision. Well, because of the experiences that I had, or rather the trial and errors and things like that I went through, I realized that a lot of people could be regretting the missed opportunities or feel a bit helpless after they've lost a job that they really liked or something like that. And I want people to realize that you should never regret a missed opportunity at any point. And rather, you are never falling short of avenues to explore when one of them is closed. And rather, actually, none of them are ever closed if you are, feeling at the short end of a road, which you thought was going somewhere and it didn't. But rather, try again or try something else. There's a lot of things that you can do, and it's never a missed opportunity in the end. Coming to one of the topics that's close to me, as you saw that I have moved around a lot for my career and my studies. There are a lot of different things I learned from each country. But I would definitely like to emphasize the most on the cultural aspects of each countries that they have to offer and that you have to be aware of before you move to these countries. Of course, every country is different in their own way. Every country offers a culture that is different in their own way. From what I gathered, of course, these are very individualistic opinion, and they are my opinion or my point of view. But basically, there are lots of similarities and dissimilarities, small nuances, and a lot of things that are subtle that you need to observe. What I understood or what I experienced was that adapting to a new way of living, new way of working, always comes from the fact that you have to be open-minded enough to observe those differences and similarities. Of course, knowing something about the culture you're stepping into helps, but also understanding that not putting any prejudice or not putting any stereotypical connotation to a culture you're moving to helps even more. And of course, it also helps a lot more to realize your own culture that you're bringing in yourself. Now, coming to what made me want to address the fact that different countries have different culture and that we should be aware of it. Now, there's this Lewis model that you can see on the screen, which is something that was developed back in 1990s by Richard Lewis. And he found that actually he did the studies with over 200 different countries and territories. And he found that the cultures of all the countries can be divided into three most predominant categories. And they're all based on behavior rather than nationality or religion or traditions. It's actually more based on behavior. And these can be divided into linear active, multi-active, and reactive variations or behaviors. When moving abroad, now you can see that UK is very close to linear active. Now, what you mean by linear active is somebody who puts facts over diplomacy, is cool and logical in the way they put forward their points, and they decide, or they are decisive planners, they're organized, and all sorts of things. Basically, that's what you would put in a linear active category. And a multi-active category is somebody who's warm, who's friendly, who's going to be lively, talk a lot. It's a social environment. So that's where you see Italy, Spain, Brazil, all these countries that you have this warm, good vibe feeling whenever you hear the country, name of the country. And then finally, there's the reactive, who are more composed, but they're also very courteous, and whatever they respond is always going to be based on how they perceive you are talking to them, or how they perceive you are going to be happy. Now, neither of them are better than the other, or rather, no one behavior is better than the other. It's just the adaptability. When you move, for example, taking the example of UK, which is so close to linear active, if you move to a country like Nigeria or Greece, of course, you're going to take your cool factual behavior with you, but that doesn't mean that you individually are going to be exactly how it's spelled out for like how British people will be. But at the same time, you will have to be aware that whatever that you think in your culture is okay might not be okay in Greece or in Nigeria, and you being cool and factual could almost be rude and too direct, basically. Now, these are actually more broad, and they define the culture of the country in general. Individually, you could be something completely different. You could actually be more relatable to someone from Iran or Turkey or India, but actually you're from Germany or Switzerland. It can happen, and this does not define how you would be individually, rather how your culture has shaped you into becoming an individual, and you will always take those with you, no matter how you personally will be. This you will always think is the norm, and this is where the adaptability comes in. And knowing what you bring also helps you then adapt to what the new country that you're stepping into will bring you. Sorry. And this basically majorly helps you in finding the sense of belonging into a new place, and also the overall happiness in working and living abroad, basically. Now, I do have short slide or like something to tell you about how a combination of both vocation and avocation can be complementary to each other. So there's this quotation I really like, which says, find 3 hobbies you love, 1 to make you money, 1 to keep you in shape, and 1 to be creative. And this is something I've always adhered by. And that's why I've written check, check, and check, because I do have a hobby that I love and I use to make money, which is my career, which is, of course, the whole point why Finding True North is trying to give you all the new informations or bringing us in to be able to help you find that career which feels like a hobby and is that you'll be passionate about, basically. Of course, another hobby is to keep you in shape, which is like sports or something that you like. And the one creative one that I personally like is cooking and also traveling. How they help me with my career is quite interesting, actually. Content-wise, I wouldn't say they necessarily add a lot, but they definitely add a lot in the way of working, my way of working. For example, they help me, first of all, have an open mind, which comes from the fact that I love traveling. And also it helps me look at different angles, especially when it comes to visualizing a concept of an issue, or if we have to design something, for example, design a product, then looking at it in a different angle really helps, which comes from my artistic side of hobbies, basically. What these hobbies also help with is for me to relax, unwind, and reset, a fresh perspective, if you may, at looking at the issues that I have at hand. And also they help me with furthering my analytical point of view that I bring into my engineering skills, basically. So with that, I would like to give 3 takeaways that you might benefit from. Never assume. So this is something that I had mentioned, that while traveling, one thing that you have to be very aware of is that everything that you feel or do comes from assumptions and comes from opinions. And that's fine to have. However, try to understand that prejudice can sometimes be completely taking you in a wrong direction. And so never assume. So this will help you integrate into a new culture and new country much better. Adapting does not mean conforming. Always be yourself. By adapting, it doesn't mean that you have to always be like, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, sir, no, ma'am, whenever they want you to say that. And hence, if you're going to a new country and you want to adapt to them, it doesn't mean you have to conform and be exactly like them. It means you bring your own self into their realm and adapt. And if you have passion, this is my favorite, if you have passion, you will always make it. Like I said, no opportunity or no missed opportunity should be regretted. Rather, you should make your own opportunity. And this, of course, is always fed by the passion that you bring for the work that you want to do, or the effort you want to put into the work that you want to do. And with that, we are coming to the Q&A now.
Thank you so much, Jahnabi, for that. We've actually already had a question come in, so I want to jump straight into the question. Before I do that, just a reminder for anyone who's joined us, you can ask a question 2 ways, either through the comments tab in whatever platform you're watching, or by going to slido.com and using the code FTN, which you can see in the corner. So the question is it better to try and apply for large multinational companies or to apply for smaller companies in specific countries?
Okay, a very good question. I would say it depends on what you're looking for. For example, if you know already what kind of position and role you want, I don't think it should matter a lot whether it's a big company or a small company if you're getting the opportunity. If you're trying to look for something new or something challenging, then a small company is always more colorful in that way, as in there are more challenges, you will be responsible for more positions than you've asked for or you bargained for rather, and it can be also very fast paced. On the other hand, if you're not very sure what you're looking for and you would like to get a taste of few different things or few different positions, then a big company is much more secure that way. This is also something that holds true. Basically, smaller companies can be less secure with your job, with the position that you're in, but the larger company or very big corporate company will give you a bigger flavor of more things that you would like to experience before you decide on which one is the right opportunity for you. So when moving to a new country as well, I would say if you're very sure of what you want to do in your career, then moving to a new country into a smaller company should be fine. But if you're not, then I think getting the wider flavor is the way to go.
I think just to add to that, some advice that I've been given before is, if you're working in a big company and you want to get experience abroad, like look for internal moves.
Yeah.
And I know people who have gone to the manager and say, look, I like what I'm doing, but I want to try and work out in the US. And that manager was great to say, actually, well, like, here's a job I found internally. Why don't you apply for that and I'll support you? And that gives you, I guess, that security as well of, the company, that you're not going to be on this new probation, and you also might know some people. We do have some other questions, but I'll pass it over to Olivia so I don't monopolize it all.
Like, to be fair, I have no problem of the audience monopolizing. But I will ask my question. Jahnabi, thank you once again for being part of this journey. I'm so thrilled that we have an audience asking lots of questions already. I do have a question myself. So let me, because I've been writing things down whilst you've been talking. So let me think. What one should I start first? Okay. Right. So in your talk, you mentioned about the kind of trial and error stage, following your PhD, deciding what route to take. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really interesting because there is this kind of impression that after you finish your university career, whether it's bachelor's, master's, and PhD, that you have things all figured out. And of course, there's no other way that you can really reinvent yourself. And I think figuring out what you're good at and maybe what you want to specialize in, what you want your identity to be in a corporate field is very important. And I think you taking your traineeship was in some sense quite scary because, with finishing your PhD, you have the chance to become an academic, become a professor, or go into industry. But you taking the traineeship was a kind of a message to yourself saying, well, I've got my PhD and I'm a world expert in this, but if I wanted to, I can add on to my skills. And I think that was very, very noble to take. And that I do have a question. So my question is, how did you feel about taking almost like another education program after your university degree, which is already one topic, and then your traineeship was kind of business and engineering? So I'm sure the students can relate to that. Maybe they have a subject that they're doing now, but they're interested in something else. Or people are in a job now and they're thinking they may want to pivot. Can you explain to us why you made that move and how you feel about it now?
Right, sure, definitely. Very good question, Olivia. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Right. Like I mentioned, the pivotal point, it was a lot of reflection on what I wanted out of my life. Now, I've always been a very curious person and I really have a lot of thirst for knowledge. And basically, I found that many a times companies hire you with certain expectations, and then you find out eventually or quite early on that either you're not meeting their expectations because it was misaligned, or they are not meeting your expectations because they hire you, promising you that you will be given this responsibility, you will be taught these things and all sorts of lists. But when you start, you're actually left in the water to just sink or sail, basically. either you just float by or you just drown. So I would say that was one of the wake-up calls when I had a near experience of such a thing with one of my companies. I felt that, okay, I was hired for a certain position, but very soon they started jittering from what they had promised. And I felt that this is something maybe I cannot necessarily have a huge leverage on, because indeed I'm new into working in the industry right after PhD, and I don't have a lot of experience. But I could then have a traineeship where I could develop certain skills that would then have that will then equip me with the kind of leverage I need, not just to have an experience in the content of the job, because that is something that you will always learn regardless of how many years of experience you have, because as soon as you change a job, you have to relearn a few things, but rather in the way of standing up for yourself. And that is something a lot to do with personal development. And this is where I felt, no, if I develop myself sooner, I think it's going to pay off for a very long time in the long run.
Oh, that's really great. But just before you add that, because when you do traineeships, or if it's like a summer institute like the Tech Allies Network, you're doing that because you're investing in your future self. Yeah. And also you develop the personal attributes that will take you to the next level. So I really love your use of the word leverage there, because you're using that to empower yourself. Absolutely. Not just emotionally, but also intellectually. Yeah. So I'm super excited what the students or audience have any other questions. Have you got anything to add to that?
Just to add to your point there, I think it's very easy, especially when you're at the beginning of your career, you see all these examples and you always hear positive, really good stories of these people who achieve a lot at a very young age, that you feel that pressure sometimes to try and excel at as quickly as possible. Yeah. And I think sometimes taking that step back and going, actually, before I go down a particular path, I want to build a broad base of skills, and it may mean taking a kind of a step down. It can be, or be just to the side, a step to the side, so you can learn more skills, so you're more informed about, actually, I want to develop my expertise in this area, because once you're down that line, it's very hard to then jump across to something else without taking a massive step back. It's the stuff that I've seen others talk about, and I can relate to that as well. Anyway, another question is, any advice concerning the uncertainty around Brexit and applying or trying to move abroad? Any question to do with Brexit is a hard one to answer, but do you have any thoughts, Jahnabi, about, I guess, as well, thinking about that?
Yeah.
I would say, so I work for ASML, which is one of the biggest companies one of the biggest high-tech companies that are manufacturing chips. Well, we make the machines that manufacture the chips, the software, not software, sorry, the semiconductor chips that go into the laptops and into the phones. And we don't yet have a hiring freeze. And we are not the only companies, I would say. There are lots of companies in the world that are eager to take in talent. And that is something that a lot of companies always have a hunger for, talent. And Brexit or not, your opportunity is not going to be defined by that, and it's not going to block it, because think of it this way: I come from India, and a lot of my colleagues are also from India or from other parts of the world, Africa, China, South America, and they've all had the same kind of entrance interview or assessment, like the people in Netherlands, in UK. So it's not going to affect you in any way, seriously. A lot of companies, big companies, of course, but a lot of companies are definitely not going to look into these aspects, basically. Yeah.
Why were you going to say something? I can see you're thinking.
I do, yeah. So kind of going back to something that you mentioned in your presentation, and we kind of discussed this on the last episode as well with Matt Long, who's in Switzerland, is around that cultural side, adjusting to different cultures. And I loved the Lewis model. I'd never heard of it before. That is something I'm taking away and like studying now to find. How have you adjusted to, I guess, different cultures and building out that, I guess, resiliency of, you know, if you're not a very direct person, going to an area where it is very direct can feel like actually you've attacked me when actually they haven't attacked me. So yeah, just a bit around that.
Indeed, you know, that's it's something that you have to get, I wouldn't say get used to, but more like something that you learn every day. This is where, of course, the Lewis model helps in already trying to understand the new culture that you're going to step into. Usually you're never prepared for an unexpected encounter, like you mentioned. You know, you are being polite or they are being direct, but you think they are being absolutely ridiculous or rude, you know, in the way they are so forthcoming. But the fact that if you educate yourself, it comes down to just educating yourself by discussing about cultures. Maybe if you network with people from that culture, really ask straightforward, okay, in our culture, it's like this. How is it in your culture, basically? And there are lots of books. Of course, it's not always easy to like go through each and every book that is going to tell you about culture. That's not what you need to do. But I think there are a few other models like the Lewis model that really help you already maybe prepare yourself in understanding, okay, if I step into this country amidst this culture, what are the things that I need to be aware of, you know? For example, I'll give you a very, very funny incident that happened to my coach. So she is German and she wanted to get to the airport, and she asked to the cabbie, basically, how long to the airport. And the cabbie, being from a Southeast Asian country, asked her, do you need to wash your hands? Now, that's a very confusing question, isn't it? That's a very confusing question as an answer to a question that is as direct as how long to the airport. Now, the answer that he gave, the indirect answer, was that it's actually very far, and if you need to go to the toilet, go now. But the Southeast Asian culture is so polite. They are very courteous. They're not going to ask a lady directly, do you need to go to the toilet? So he would ask, do you need to wash your hands? So these kind of things, you know, it's not easy to prepare yourself with, unless you're trying to actively make yourself aware of it. And this is, in a way, my attempt to perhaps make you aware that there are tools that you can use to make yourself more aware about the new culture you'll step into, basically.
Do you know, that's so funny. I was literally going like, where are you going with this? Like, what he mean? Like, what does he mean by that? But he's actually trying to be polite and not make it a big thing.
Yeah.
That actually reminds me, for some reason, I always go like, where's the restroom? Instead of saying the toilet, I'm like, restroom. And people always like laugh at me and they're like, restroom? I'm like, yeah, restroom. And it's kind of a similar thing, but to me, it just feels like I automatically just say like, where's the restroom? I didn't think about it now. So that's interesting. Anyway, enough from my reflection. Olivia.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, thinking back to your friend when she, asked the question, got that response back, and eventually got to her destination. I'm just wondering what type of review that she left the cabbie. Like, could you imagine? The journey was great. I got there on time, but for some reason he asked the most odd question. But I think that is such a really good example because, and in your case, you moved abroad to live and work. And especially for the students listening or anybody who is our age, it's more than just moving abroad and fitting into the life culture. But when you move for work, there's an extra complexity because the work environment has its own culture. So you have to adjust to the kind of national culture. You have to adjust to the corporate culture. And then as a student, it would be like you're moving away for university. And when you move to university, that place has a culture, the geographical culture, and then the university has a culture as well. How did you find your sense of belonging in a corporate setting? And what did you realize was like basically an element that you needed when deciding to move to another place of work, but also another country to live and work in?
In all honesty, it hasn't always been easy because some cultures, while being very open and easy to adapt to, for example, UK was very easy to adapt to because people are honest, people are polite, but they are still sticking to the facts, there's no talking, like beating around the bush, talking in circles. But then there were other countries where it was extremely difficult to understand what did the person actually mean. And it can be quite difficult then to adapt faster than you had imagined. Same for your corporate cultures or your industrial cultures, company cultures, or even like the group of friends that you have, they bring their own particular culture basically. So like I said, first of all, don't presume or don't assume, don't have any prejudice, and whatever happens, just observe. The first thing you do in the room when you enter is observe and see what people are doing, how it is perceived, or how things are moving. All that, just observe without any assumptions, without any opinion, just observe. And the other thing I would say is, of course, be true about yourself, to yourself, and to others about what you're feeling and thinking. Get it out in the open, I would say, you can do it in different ways. You can do it very directly, like the linear active behavior. You can do it in a more friendly way, like the multicultural behavior, or you can do it in a reactive way. You see what the person is saying, how they are saying, and you speak in the way that they will understand, basically. So it gets easier once you start having a diverse group of people around you. But if you don't, then it's much more difficult. I would have to be honest about that. For example, Belgium was actually quite difficult because I was surrounded by a less diverse group, and they all had a culture that was difficult to crack because no one was explaining to me what was being lost in the translation, basically. So it can be quite difficult if you have a gap and nobody is helping you bridge that gap. But you also have to make an active effort in bridging that gap, basically.
Yeah, that's really interesting because you're effectively saying that even if you're moving companies or you're moving abroad to live and work, it's important for you to be a culture chameleon. You need to be able to understand the person that you're speaking to, the perspective that they have, their nuances, how they work, so that you can bond with them, you can connect with them. Especially being in a digital environment with the pandemic, it is sometimes very difficult to form a connection over the internet. It's not as if you can see their nuances. On a webcam, you're only showing somebody what you want them to see. It's difficult to even stand out and even form a good impression. I think it's super interesting. But with that, I imagine with your extracurricular activities, whether it's kung fu, whether it's dancing, whether it's photography, and whether it's cooking, you're using that to bond. And I think with social media, that can be a way to, especially in this digital world with the pandemic, to show what you're into. You can visually do it because you can't do it physically. And with that, I wanted to ask Ryan, what's the result of the poll?
Just before we go into the poll, reflecting again on what you just said there about observing the room, I actually think I make it harder for others to observe, because I have this weird thing. If I get on really well with someone, I'm in a way offensive. Like, if I'm comfortable enough to say it sounds really harsh to be like I'm offensive to people that I get.
It's basically you're saying it's banter, right?
Yeah, essentially it's that. For example, I have a colleague who I get on really well with, and when we're on a group call, I'm like, oh, blah blah, I see you made an effort today, you brushed your hair. But if someone's just doesn't know our dynamic, or is just joined and observing it all, I really hope they don't follow suit and start insulting people.
No. Don't worry about that. No. Actually, it's a good point both of you raised, and especially touching upon what Olivia said about the fact that you have to be like a cultural chameleon. Bear in mind, other people are trying to do the same. So if you're trying to adapt to their culture, they are trying to adapt to you too. And like you said, Ryan, when you like somebody, you start, having this banter, very friendly banter that can be almost offensive. I'm pretty sure people see through that as being, oh, this person's actually so friendly that I can be myself with them, So actually, you're kind of making people more comfortable, I would say, by doing something like that. That is you being yourself. Like I said, adapting does not mean conforming. You're not trying to conform to the room. You're trying to just adapt by being yourself, and that's important. That's very important.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Just back to that poll. So the results that came in. So the question was, do you have a hobby or hobbies that you wish, you would love to explore career-wise? And we've had 60% have said yes, 40% have said not sure if I want to explore them as a career, and 0% have said no.
Oh, that's nice.
Surprised at that? Or, why did you ask that question? What was your thinking behind it?
Yeah, well, so basically, this is where the topic about mixing vocation with evocation comes in. Basically, if you're interested in something and you love it so much that you also want to pursue a career in it, you will definitely succeed in it. And even if you don't feel that you're commercially as successful as maybe somebody at the pinnacle of that hobby or career, you will still feel accomplished because you've ticked all the milestones you wanted to, you've ticked all the boxes that you wanted to. And this is where it is important that whatever you're doing, you love it, basically. Like, do what you love what you do, sort of thing. Of course, it doesn't mean that you have to have a hobby and you have to then pursue it as a career. Like, for example, you want to be a painter, but you don't necessarily want to pursue it as a career, as your primary career. You want to maybe have some exhibitions in the future, but you don't necessarily see yourself selling paintings, as your career. Then of course it's understandable, and there are lots of hobbies like that where you want something that you are like, okay, I want something that brings in more success in terms monetary success, for example. than the hobby that I have, and I know that the hobby is not necessarily going to bring me a monetary success. The in all honesty, actually, it may or it will if you have, or if you invest as much as you want in it, or if you have the full passion in pursuing it as your main career. But of course, if of course it's something that you are like, no, maybe it's not something I would like to, because sometimes you can also ruin the passion by making it a job. That can also happen. Then of course, by all means, have 2 or 3 different hobbies. Like I said, have one to give you the monetary satisfaction, have another one to stay fit, and have one to bring out your creativity. So of course it's not something that you have to adhere to, but I'm just interested to know how many people actually would love to pursue what they have, because that can be your calling, basically, in the end.
I think you bring up a really good point that sometimes a hobby or a passion you love because it's not your job.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, as soon as you make it your job and there's all these different expectations, it's less
Yeah.
about you doing it because you enjoy it, and it's because someone's telling you to do it. Like,
Yeah.
I personally have had some of those things where people say, oh, you love this, why don't you do that as a job? And I said, as soon as you turn it into a job, I'm not going to enjoy it.
Exactly. Yeah.
But one of my takeaways that I'm taking from this is that idea of, have 3 hobbies, one that you can make money from, one that can get you in shape and keep you in shape, and one that can bring out your creativity. But that's one of my key takeaways. So thank you for that. Olivia, any key takeaways to wrap up from your end, or additional questions?
Oh well, I'm not sure I have a takeaway just yet, but I will be thinking about those 3 aspects and how they apply to me. But I have a question regarding your profession and you transitioning from, I guess we can call it like the physical to the digital. And with the pandemic, it's really forced everybody to rethink what they want to do with their career and whether it's compatible with remote working. Like, I think back to, for example, even just doing mechanical engineering or doing your PhD. Like, could you have imagined trying to do your PhD as it was in the pandemic, having to go into the lab, having to do the experiments, and even with your job before lockdown, I imagine it was very lab based and lots of collaboration and then lots of talking with people in person. I wanted to know, do you feel that your industry is compatible with remote working? And what advice would you give to others who are maybe in professions that may not be as compatible with remote working as it should be? And if they should consider pivoting, and what's your experiences about that?
Ooh, that's a very deep question. The reason being, so my company adapted really well with remote working, but a lot of us who have to work in the lab are working on critical projects that need people to be in the lab. And for those people, we are allowed to go in the lab. So nothing has changed that much for me. But of course, like you said, other companies or other people who are working in a company where they had to have a full 180 from like being physically there to 100% digital, it can be very difficult. It can feel lonely. It can feel boring. It can feel overwhelming. It could be any of these, and for those, I would say, of course, I mean, changing the vocation, changing the job is a bit too drastic. What they could try to do is change it up a bit, actually. I mean, not the job itself, but how they work, the way of working. Try and see if they can actually sometimes be present in person once a week. Maybe that change itself can help. It's a bit of a difficult topic for me to give an advice on, really, because like I said, things didn't really change for me that much. Of course, whenever I was working at home, it was a bit more overwhelming, but you have to put the limit in your work work life from your home life, basically private life. And that's very difficult once you start working from home, because you really don't have a very clear demarcation on when you stop working and when you start living your life at home. And this is something maybe would be a small advice, is that maybe organize yourself in such a way that you know what are the tasks you want to do on that day, and also time yourself. So if you said you're going to work 7 hours a day or 8 hours a day, you time yourself and you work only those hours a day. And also, this is something that I know it's a loophole, and it's also something that people can fall into, a trap that, okay, I said 8 hours, so I'm going to work 1 hour, then take 2 hours break, and then work another hour. Then you end up working the whole day. Don't do that. Really don't do that, because that is more draining than working intensively for a few hours, like 5 hours, and then taking a break. Working sporadically throughout the day is not productive, and also not healthy, really.
Great, thanks for that advice. Yeah, lots of students are working from home extensively for the first time. Many of us are adjusting our working habits, and some of us are adjusting our work wardrobe. Ryan, I think back to the episode last weekend. Last week, sorry, when you spoke about the onesie. Yeah. But of course, it doesn't matter, because if your productivity is still there, it shouldn't matter what you wear or how you wear your hair as well. I think that's really great advice. Ryan, have you got any other questions, or is there anything else?
We have actually hit time. So, but we can ask, you can ask, and we can answer some more questions on the episode highlight guide. So actually, I'll pass it back to you to explain.
Great. John, if you can go to the next slide, I'll explain. Absolutely. Thank you.
Absolutely. Getting there. Here you go.
Fantastic. Thank you. So we've had a really, really great episode in how to thrive when living and working abroad, how to reinvent yourself and invest in yourself when finishing university, or whether you want to pivot from one subject to another, and also how to find your sense of self when setting into a new environment. I think it's been very, very helpful, and thank you, audience, for taking part and asking questions. Jahnabi, again, thank you so much for joining us. Very busy schedule. Of course, Ryan just said, if you have any more questions and we didn't get to answer it, Jahnabi will be answering some questions, but of course in written form, offline. And of course, if you want the slides that Jahnabi presented, it will be available an episode highlight document that's going to be published on the Tech Allies Network website on Friday, the 31st of July, specifically on the Finding True North webpage, and that is on the screen now and in the YouTube description below. And next week we have a very different day, so it's not Wednesday as we typically have it. It's going to be on a Tuesday, but it's for a very good reason, and we have a very interesting guest that Ryan knows. So Ryan, do you want to explain who this guest is?
Yes, so we have Zainab joining us, who is a digital product manager at Barclays, and I know Zainab because we started the graduate scheme together actually a number of years ago. She has the best advice ever. She's done many things. She has so many accomplishments. She honestly, tune in. She will give you lots of practical advice. So, and as Olivia said, it will be on a Tuesday instead for next week. But then we'll be back to our normal Wednesday showings. But thank you, Jahnabi, for joining today. I personally have taken away a number of things that I'm now going to work on and figure out what my hobbies. Look at the Lewis model as well. So thank you so much.
No, thank you so much for having me here. Really, it's an honor.
Cool. Catch everyone at our